Some of the best stories in sports history are those when the underdog is able to overcome insurmountable odds, and there is no underdog greater than AFC Wimbledon.
Berry came into the match on the back of a 4-1 home loss to Southend at the weekend. Their confidence took another blow and they conceded on 27 minutes. Lyle Tyler's enticing ball was slotted home by Paul Robinson as the Dons netted again.
But before we can get to AFC Wimbledon, we have to start with a different team, a team called Wimbledon FC. These apartments, they used to be something special. Before they were ever constructed, this land was Plough Lane, the stadium which was home to Wimbledon FC for 86 years. Wimbledon FC was founded in 1889 as the Wimbledon Old Central Football Club. They'd have to wait 6 years before winning their first trophy when in 1895 they won the Clapham League. They'd achieve occasional success throughout the first half of the 20th century, but things changed in 1961 when they'd start their streak of winning 3 straight Isthmian leagues. The show of dominance in the amateur leagues really paid off when in 1977 they became a professional club when they got promoted into the Football League. A quick side note, in England and some other countries, there's a system of promotion and relegation in football where the team who wins the league as well as the runner-up will get automatically promoted, along with the winner of a playoff that takes place between the teams who finish between 3rd and 6th in the league, and the teams who finish in the bottom 3 spots will get relegated down a league. The Dons are finally a professional team in the Football League's 4th division, where they finished their first season with a record of 14 wins, 16 draws, and 15 losses. Finally reached the top flight of English football after they were promoted in the 1986-87 season. In their first season in the top flight, they'd finished 6th overall, which is just 1 spot away from getting to compete in the UEFA Cup, which is for the best clubs in Europe. In their second season in the top flight, Wimbledon would have one of the most memorable moments in football history. It's May 14th, 1988 at Wembley Stadium. 98,000 people are in attendance to see the final of the FA Cup tournament. The FA Cup started with every professional club in England, but is now down to just 2, Liverpool FC and Wimbledon FC. Liverpool had dominated in the 80s, winning 5 national championships in just 6 years, while Wimbledon FC had only been in the top flight of English football since the previous season. Nobody expected a massive club like Liverpool to lose to a club like Wimbledon FC, but Laurie Sanchez of Wimbledon would score the game's lone goal after a free kick assist from Dennis Wise. When the game was over, the BBC's John Motson had his iconic line,
"The crazy gang have beaten the Culture Club."
The FA Cup win was supposed to be the start of a new era with the Dons as future champions, but in the years following they were only able to finish 6th in the league in the newly rebranded Premier League. The worst was yet to come though, as at the end of the 1999-2000 season, 12 years exactly since their miraculous FA Cup win, Wimbledon FC was relegated from the Premier League to the first division of the Football League. Things would get worse when the greatest tragedy in Wimbledon FC's history occurred. The owners, with the full support of the English Football Association, decided to move the team to Milton Keynes ahead of the 2002-2003 season. The new team would be called the MK Dons, but would be known as the franchise to the supporters of the former Wimbledon FC, because in England, the football team for a town becomes part of its identity and its culture. So the unprecedented move from Wimbledon rocked the town's core, and they weren't going to let it stand. Lost their team they had supported for over a century, but the town of Wimbledon would not let the loss of their team and the 113-year-long history of soccer in their town end at the hands of one greedy owner. So they did what anybody would do. They made their own club, and it would be owned by its fans to prevent another scenario of the team moving ever happening again. And this team would be known as AFC Wimbledon, with the AFC meaning a fans club. AFC Wimbledon would be founded by 3 people named Mark Jones, Trevor Williams, and Chris Stewart. The tryouts for the team would be held at Wimbledon Park, a park open to anybody, where 230 people showed up to get on the squad. 23 of those people would end up making it for the inaugural season of AFC Wimbledon. AFC Wimbledon's inaugural season would come in the Combined Counties League. The inaugural season would end with a record of 36 wins, 3 draws, and 7 losses, which was good enough to qualify them for the playoffs. They'd win their first ever postseason game against the Walton Casuals, where they won in a very tense penalty shootout, but would get demolished in the second round 5-1 against South Hall. The Dons' second season, they'd get a chance to show their dominance. They went unbeaten, winning 42 of their 46 games, and they'd draw the other 4. They would dominate in the playoffs to get promoted back to the Isthmian League. The Dons were back in the Isthmian League's bottom division, and like their performance 42 years earlier, they'd win the division, getting promoted to the Isthmian League's top division for the 2006 season. They would spend 3 seasons in the Isthmian League's top division before getting promoted after finishing 3rd in the division and winning the playoff, where they'd be in the Conference South. They would win the Conference South in 2009, getting promoted to the Conference National. Their first season in the Conference National, they placed 8th, which was the worst placement in club history. But in the following season, a miracle would happen. It's May 21st, 2011 at the City of Manchester Stadium for the Conference National Playoff Final. This game will promote either AFC Wimbledon or Luton Town into the Football League, and the winner will become a professional football team. Any other year, this game would be played at Wembley Stadium. But this year, Wembley was hosting the biggest football game in the world, the Champions League Final. That meant the final had to be moved to another stadium, which would be the City of Manchester Stadium. Going into the game, Wimbledon had just finished their 2-game series, winning 2-1 and 6-1 respectively. Luton Town had won their games 3-0 and 2-1 to qualify for the final. Both teams were giving it their all for the chance to become professionals. The game was going to be a rough one, with both teams getting yellow cards in the first half, with Brett Jones of Wimbledon getting the first yellow card in the 33rd minute, and Keith Keane of Luton Town getting a card in the 45th minute, just before halftime. The score was 0-0 for the start of the second half. Both teams would get another set of yellow cards, with Luton Town's Alexander Lawless in the 54th minute, and Wimbledon's Luke Moore in the 80th minute. At the end of regulation, the score would be 0-0 still, and even after 2 periods of extra time, the score would remain 0-0, which means the game would have to go to a penalty shootout. Luton Town would have the first shot, with Alexander Lawless taking a penalty, which was saved by Seb Brown. Samuel Hatton took AFC Wimbledon's first penalty, which he scored, making the score 1-0. George Pilkington tied it for Luton Town with his penalty, making the score 1-1. Luke Moore puts Wimbledon back up with his scored penalty, making it 2-1 Wimbledon. Adam Newton equalizes the score, making it 2-2 after his score for Luton Town. Qaid Mohammed of Wimbledon misses his penalty, making it still 2-2. Facing the possibility of being down 3-2, Seb Brown makes a spectacular save against Jason Walker, keeping the score at 2-2. Ismail Jakobus goes up to the line and scores for Wimbledon, making the cumulative score 3-2. Jake Howells scores for Luton Town, tying it up at 3-3. Now everything rests on the shoulders of Danny Kedwell. Kedwell has been a semi-pro with Wimbledon for 3 years, and now the hopes and dreams of the town of Wimbledon rest on his shoulders. He goes up for the penalty.
Penalty kick.
He scored. Wimbledon were back in the Football League for the first time since Wimbledon FC had left. This team had gone from 3 guys organizing a tryout in a public park to being a professional football team. Now that AFC Wimbledon were back in the Football League, they had 2 things on their mind. They wanted to get revenge against the franchise in Milton Keynes and reclaim their rightful spot back in the Premier League. The only thing in the way of Wimbledon getting their revenge against Milton Keynes was the fact that Milton Keynes was still in League One, which was 1 division above Wimbledon, so they'd have to get promoted in order to face them on a regular basis. Despite being in different divisions, AFC Wimbledon and Milton Keynes ended up meeting in a special interdivisional tournament called the FA Cup, where Milton Keynes would win 2-1 in 2012, and then again in 2014, but in October of 2014, things would change. The first half would go terribly for Wimbledon, letting 2 goals in and only scoring 1, but Sean Riggs would be able to tie the game 2-2 in the second half, and in the 80th minute, Adebayo Akinfenwa would score a game-winning 3rd goal for AFC Wimbledon. This wouldn't be the last time Akinfenwa comes up big. For the next big moment in Wimbledon history, we're jumping forward a season in the 2015-16 season. Wimbledon just barely snuck into the playoffs with their 21 wins, 12 draws, and 13 losses. Now in the final, they'd end up facing Plymouth Argyle. The first half was a tough fight and ended scoreless, but in the second half, Lyle Taylor, the Montserratian Messi, came up big and scored, making the score Wimbledon 1, Argyle 0. And then in injury time, after a hard-fought second half, Adebayo Akinfenwa was fouled in the penalty box and scored his penalty, sealing away any hope of an Argyle comeback, with Wimbledon winning 2-0 and getting promoted to League One. Moving on from the end of the 2016 season to the middle of the 2019 season, AFC Wimbledon were in trouble. They were in dead last of League One and grave danger of being relegated. They had only 12 wins, 5 draws, and 22 losses. But then something special started to happen. Their game against Shrewsbury Town ended in a draw, and they followed that up with 3 wins versus the Doncaster Rovers, Peterborough United, and Southend United. They were still in danger of relegation, but they were out of last place. If they could climb from 22nd to 20th, they would scrape by without getting relegated. But a 4-2 loss versus Gillingham dropped their rank to 23rd. A rebound win versus Scunthorpe United pushed them back up to 22, and the next 4 games would all end in draws. There was a 1-1 draw versus Accrington Stanley, 0-0 versus Oxford United, 1-1 versus Bristol Rovers, and a 2-2 draw versus Luton Town. Joe Pizzo would end up scoring 2-1 in a much-needed win against the Wycombe Wanderers, and it would all come down to the last game. While ideally this last game would have ended in a win for Wimbledon, it would end up being a 0-0 draw versus Bradford. The season was now over, the points were tallied, and AFC Wimbledon and Plymouth Argyle were tied. The team with the better goal difference would end up staying in League One, while the other would be relegated down to League Two. Wimbledon scored 42 goals but allowed 63 goals for a total net of -21, while Plymouth Argyle scored 56 goals, but because they had let up 80, their goal differential was -24. To understand how close this was, if any of Wimbledon's wins had been a tie, or any of their ties had been a loss, they would have been relegated. And if they had scored 3 less goals, they would have been relegated. But from outstanding play from Aaron Ramsdale in goal, and Joe Peugeot's leadership, along with Will Nightingale's veteran performance, AFC Wimbledon were able to scrape by in 20th place and avoid relegation. AFC Wimbledon's 2019-2020 season would end in another 20th place, narrowly avoiding relegation, but this time they have a 3-point lead over the Tranmere Rovers. But the future's looking bright. AFC Wimbledon are back at Plough Lane for the 2020-2021 season, which is the first time they'll be back in Wimbledon since 2002. And while it'll take a miracle to get back to the Premier League, miracles have happened for this team before.